The danger is to please an immediate public.
Hello everybody, welcome to The Artist Provocateur. I'm Joseph and today we're talking about two powerhouse African-American artists who totally changed the art landscape. I'm talking about the Radiant Child and the Silhouette Lady, Jean-Michel Basquiat and Carl Walker. Jean-Michel Basquiat was an American artist of Haitian and Puerto Rican descent. At age 7, was hit by a car, and while he was recovering from his injuries, his mother brought him a copy of Grey's Anatomy. This would actually prove a very lasting influence in his work. At 13, his mother was committed to a mental institution, and she spent the rest of her days going in and out of institutions. This instability actually moved Basquiat to flee his home at 15. He slept on park benches, he was arrested more than once, and he was brought back to his father's custody. At 17, he dropped out of high school, and his father actually kicked him out of the house. So he survived by making t-shirts and painting homemade postcards. In his short career, Basquiat produced about 1,500 drawings, about 600 paintings, and a lot of other mixed media objects. He drew constantly on paper, on pretty much any surface, even on other people's property. Basquiat's drawings were produced in a variety of media. Most commonly ink, felt tip or marker, oil stick, and sometimes he even photocopied his drawings and then used those photocopies applied onto his canvases for his paintings. Basquiat was a poet as well as a visual artist, so words feature heavily on his drawings and his paintings. His references are very clearly linked to racism, slavery, the people in the street scene of New York in the 1980s, and Black historical figures. Basquiat's diverse cultural heritage was also a big influence in his work. He sometimes uses Puerto Rican slang words, like for example in his painting La Jara, in which we see a skeletal, menacing white police officer. He's titling this work La Jara after a New Yorker slang term that is referred for policemen. It comes from the Irish O'Hara, which is a stereotypical last name of policemen in the 1950s. He also has a lot of works that derive from Black history, like Slave Auction, Undiscovered Genius of the Mississippi Delta, and Untitled History of the Black People. Another of Basquiat's work, Irony of the Negro Policeman, is intending to illustrate how he believes that African Americans have been controlled by a white society. He is seeking here to portray that African Americans have become complicit within what he calls, and I quote, the institutionalized forms of whiteness and corrupt white regime of power after the Jim Crow era. Basquiat used social commentary as a tool for introspection and also to identify with his experience in the Black community of his time. He is very clearly attacking power structures and systems of racism. He is also very clearly establishing a language that goes against colonialism and supports the class struggle. Jean-Michel Basquiat's career started in 1976 when he and his friend Al Diaz started graffitiing buildings in Lower Manhattan under the name SAMO. He usually accompanied these tags, these little murals, with philosophical tidbits or small drawings that would later be seen in his works, in his pictorial works. Story goes that in 1980, Jean-Michel Basquiat actually met Andy Warhol at a restaurant, and he gave him some samples of his work, and Warhol was stunned by the mystique of Basquiat's work. There's a large number of photographs that document a collaboration that existed between the two years later, but sadly this collaboration did not end up well for Jean-Michel, because Andy Warhol was the center of the art world back then, And they didn't give him enough credit. They didn't give Jean-Michel enough credit. And they went as far as to call him Andy Warhol's mascot. So in light of this, Jean-Michel actually had to go his own way. In 1981, Basquiat sold his first painting, Cadillac Moon. He actually sold it to Debbie Harry, the front woman of Blondie, for $200. Later that year, he participated in a group show called Public Address with artists such as Keith Haring and Barbara Kruger. At age 21, he became the youngest artist to ever take part of Documenta, a famous exhibit in Germany. In '82, Basquiat was working off a ground floor display and studio of Venice, California. And there he started a series of paintings for an '83 show. And he flew in his girlfriend at the time, a then unknown singer by the name of Madonna. At 22, Basquiat was included in the Whitney Biennale, and he became the youngest artist to represent America in an international exhibit of contemporary art. Basquiat was deeply affected by the death of Michael Stewart, who was a young black artist who was killed by transit police in '83. In response to this, he painted Defacement, the death of Michael Stewart. In spite of his artistic success, his emotional instability continued to haunt him, and he turned into a heavy heroin user. Many of his peers actually theorized that it was the pressure of coping with his newfound fame, the exploitative nature of the art industry, and the pressures of being a black man in a white-dominated art world. Basquiat died in 1988 of a heroin overdose in his art studio. He was 27 at the time. As a tribute to Jean-Michel, Keith Haring created Pile of Crowns for Jean-Michel Basquiat. And actually, in his memorial words for Basquiat, Keith Haring wrote, and I quote, "He truly created a lifetime of works in 10 years. Greedily, we wondered what else he might have created, what masterpieces we have been cheated out by his death. But the fact is that he has created enough work to intrigue generations to come. Only now will people begin to understand the magnitude of his contribution." In 2017, roughly 30 years after Jean-Michel's death, his painting Untitled, a 1982 piece, actually sold for $110.5 million, and it became one of the most expensive paintings ever purchased. Carol Walker is a contemporary American painter, printmaker, installation artist, and filmmaker, but she's better known for her work as a silhouettist. In her work, she explores race, gender, sexuality, violence, and identity. Carol Walker has said that she found herself uncomfortable and afraid to address race in her early works. It wasn't until she was studying her master's that she actually took this bold step and started putting race at the center of her paintings. But, however, being a black woman, she was again worried that the fact that she had race at the very core of her work would be seen as typical or obvious. Walker is best known for her panoramic friezes of cut paper silhouettes. They're usually black figures against a white wall, and they address the history of American slavery and racism through violent and very unsettling imagery. The black and white silhouettes confront the realities of history. They use stereotypes from the era of slavery to relate to modern day concerns. Her first big hit came in 1994 with her mural Gone, a historical romance of a civil war as it occurred between the dusky thighs of one young negress and her heart. In 1997, when Carol Walker was 27, she became the second youngest recipient of the MacArthur Genius Grant. It was very controversial, not just because of the content of her work, but because she was so young, and also, weirdly enough, because she was widely popular with white audiences. The use of this grotesque and nightmarish images to represent the African American community is not an artistic license either. Carol Walker is lifting these images straight from historical textbooks and publicities that existed at the time that depict what the African American community position is in the antebellum South. There is no subtlety in the power structure when we see Carol Walker's work. She is blatantly telling us who is in charge. There is no mistaking the Negroes from the whiteys, because she is totally removing this filter of the rosy-colored glasses of the idealized South. And she's telling us where the violence is coming from and who is receiving it. Now, some of her images is really hard to stomach. For example, in the Battle of Atlanta, a white man who's presumably a Southern soldier is raping a black girl while her brother watches in shock. There's a white child that's about to insert his sword into a nearly lynched black woman's vagina, and a male black slave rains tears all over an adolescent white boy. So again, she is very boldly depicting the inequalities and mistreatment of the African American community by their white counterparts. She is telling us that there is this scale that's been set up by the white society, in which a hierarchy exists, in which white men are at the very top and women of color, particularly black women, are at the very bottom. In 2000, she presented Insurrection. Our tools were rudimentary, yet we pressed on. In it, the silhouetted characters are set against moving images of color projection in the background, and this gives the images a certain cell-like film, almost like films from the 1930s. Also, the projectors were set up in such a way that when an audience member was looking at the piece, their own silhouette, their own shadow was projected onto the wall, and therefore she turned the spectators into participants, into part of the piece, and made them aware that they are part of this giant portrayal of American society. In 2005, she created 8 Possible Beginnings, or The Creation of African America, a moving picture. In it, she introduces now the element of moving images. She has this silhouettes moving and therefore acting sort of like shadow puppets. She's also using her own voice and the voice of her daughter for the narration, letting us know how this image of African American portrayal has affected her as an artist and how it will keep on affecting future generations. In May 2014, Carol Walker presented her first sculpture, a massive monumental piece with a very long title. The piece is called A Subtlety, or The Marvelous Sugar Baby, an homage to the unpaid and overworked artisans who have refined our sweet taste from the cane fields to the kitchens of the New World on the occasion of the demolition of the Domino sugar refining plant. This massive work was set at a derelict Domino sugar plant in Brooklyn. The piece consists of a colossal female sphinx that is approximately 75 feet long and 35 feet high. She is preceded by an arrangement of 15 life-size young male figurines that are called attendants. The Sphinx, which has the head and features of the Mammy archetype, is made by covering a core structure in 80 tons of sugar. The smaller figures are actually shaped after racist figurines that Carol Walker purchased online, and they are made out of pressed and heated sugar, sort of like molasses or caramel. After the exhibit finished, both the piece and the factory were demolished, were razed to the ground as it was planned from the beginning. In 2019, Carol Walker presented Fons Americanos, or American Fountain, which measures up to 13 meters high, and it references Europe, America, and Africa, particularly the Atlantic slave trade. Again, by creating a monument, Carol Walker is asking us to reflect on the value of monuments themselves. As Sadie Smith said, and I quote, "Monuments are complacent. They put a seal upon the past. They release us from dread. For Walker, dread is an engine. It prompts us to remember and rightly fear the ruins we shouldn't want to return to and don't wish to recreate if we're wise. Kara Walker is no stranger to controversy. The bold nature of her images and her subject matter actually had led a lot of conversations on whether or not her work belongs just in art galleries or if it could live somewhere else. This was the case for the Newark Public Library, which had purchased the moral arc of history, ideally bends towards justice, but just as soon as not curves back around towards barbarism, sadism, and unrestrained chaos. This work was actually placed at the public library, and employees of the library debated whether or not this was the right piece to have there. Because the work included depictions of Ku Klux Klan, a burning cross, a naked black woman filleting a white man, and Barack Obama. The piece was actually covered but not removed, and later on Kara Walker actually visited the library for a lecture circuit where she explained the value of her work, and it was decided again that the work would be uncovered. In 2007, Kara Walker was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. She has extensively taught at Columbia University, and she's currently serving a 5-year term as chair of the Visual Arts Department at Rutgers University. Alright guys, before I leave you, here are 5 questions to get us started on our conversation about Jean-Michel Basquiat and Kara Walker. Number 1, why is the Black experience an important subject for artists? Number 2, how is being a Black artist in a white-dominated art industry more challenging? Number 3, why is cultural heritage a subject worth exploring in art? Number 4, are disturbing artworks helpful in starting a conversation about complicated subjects? And finally, number 5, what is the value of utilizing symbols that are traditionally associated with oppression to create art? Alright guys, that's our video for today. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to leave your comments below, and I will see you next time.
I just see the saddest life, a savage life, snakes and thieves. Every man has his price, it's hell below. Who will or won't sell his soul?